A long day ends. The old clock on the wall clicked past 11:30 as Delilah Monroe wiped down the last table in her small café. Her shoulders ached from the long day, and her feet begged for mercy after 12 straight hours of standing. The café, tucked away on a quiet street corner in downtown Portland, had been her dream for 3 years now. Some days that dream felt more like a burden she carried alone. She stacked the final chairs onto tables, their legs pointing toward the ceiling like surrendering soldiers. The espresso machine gleamed from her careful cleaning, and the smell of bleach mixed with lingering coffee created that Indavde scent she knew so well. Through the front windows, streetlights cast orange pools on the empty sidewalk. Another day survived, she whispered to herself. Untying her apron with tired fingers, her mother would have been proud to see this place. Even if the profit margins stayed razor thin, every cup served, every customer greeted, felt like honoring a promise made at a hospital bedside 4 years ago. The memory still brought tears if she let it. Delilah grabbed her keys from behind the register and headed toward the door. Just as her hand touched the lock, 3 sharp knocks rang against the glass. Her heart jumped. Nobody came by this late, not in this neighborhood. The man in the expensive suit through the window stood a tall man in his mid-30s, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His dark hair looked slightly disheveled, and his tie hung loose around his neck. Deep shadows sat beneath his gray eyes. But something in his expression seemed gentle rather than threatening. He pressed his palm against the glass and mouthed words she could barely make out. Please, just 1 coffee. Every instinct told Delilah to walk away. She had bills to pay tomorrow, an early morning ahead, and no reason to trust a stranger. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the exhaustion written across his face that mirrored her own. Maybe it was the way he waited patiently instead of demanding. Against her better judgment, she turned the lock. We're closed, she said, opening the door just a crack. I know. I saw you cleaning. His voice came out rough, like someone who had talked too much that day. I just need 1 cup before I head home. It's been the kind of day where you forget what peace feels like. Delilah studied him for another moment. No smell of alcohol. No aggressive stance. Just a tired man asking for coffee. Fine, 1 cup. But make it quick. Unexpected conversation. Harrison Reed stepped inside the cafe and immediately felt something shift in his chest. The space was small but warm, with exposed brick walls and mismatched furniture that somehow worked together. Soft yellow light made everything feel safe, like stepping into someone's living room instead of a business. Thank you, he said, watching as the woman moved behind the counter with practiced efficiency. I promise I'm not usually the type to bother cafe owners after closing. Could have fooled me. She pulled out fresh beans and started the grinder. What kind of coffee do you want? Whatever you think is best? I trust you. She paused, glancing at him with suspicion and curiosity mixed together. Most people have very specific opinions about their coffee. Most people haven't had a day like mine. Harrison sat at the table nearest the counter, loosening his tie completely. Sometimes you just need someone else to make the decisions. The grinder whirred to life, filling the silence. Delilah worked with the kind of grace that comes from repetition. Her hands moving through motions she could probably do blindfolded. Harrison watched, fascinated by how something so ordinary could look almost meditative. You look familiar, Delilah said as she tamped the grounds. Do you come to Portland often? I live here. Well, technically, I live in the penthouse of the Reed Tower downtown, but I'm rarely there long enough to call it living. Her hands froze for just a second. Reed Tower. As in Harrison Reed? The CEO. Guilty. He managed a tired smile. But tonight, could I just be someone who needs coffee? No titles, no expectations. Breaking down walls, Delilah set the cup in front of him, the rich aroma rising between them like an offering. She had made him a traditional cappuccino, simple but perfect. Harrison took a sip and closed his eyes. This is incredible, he said, and she could hear genuine appreciation in his voice. When was the last time something this simple felt this good? You tell me? You're the one knocking on cafe doors at midnight. He laughed, a sound that seemed rusty from disuse. Fair point. The truth is, I just left a board meeting that lasted until 11. Before that, Conference call since 6 this morning. I was driving home and saw your lights still on, and something in me just couldn't face that empty apartment yet. Delilah leaned against the counter, studying him. The exhaustion she had dismissed as her own problem suddenly looked back at her from a stranger's face. Rich or poor? Apparently some kinds of tired felt the same. So you decided to crash my closing routine? I decided to take a chance that maybe someone else was also tired of being alone. Harrison met her eyes. I'm sorry if that sounds dramatic. It's been a long few months. Something in his honesty disarmed her. Delilah poured herself a small cup and sat across from him, breaking her own rule about sitting with customers. What's so terrible about your life that you need midnight coffee? She asked it gently, not mocking. Nothing's terrible. That's almost worse. Harrison turned the cup in his hands. I have everything people say they want. Money, success, influence. But somewhere along the way, I lost the ability to just be a person. Every conversation is a negotiation. Every meal is a business dinner. Every decision affects hundreds of employees. Tonight, I just wanted to sit somewhere that didn't expect anything from me. Shared stories. Delilah found herself nodding. I get that. Different scale, but I get it. This cafe was my mother's dream. She died before she could open it, so I did it for her. Some days I love it so much it hurts. Other days I wonder if I'm just punishing myself by trying to keep a promise to someone who's gone. Harrison looked at her with new attention. That's not punishment. That's love. Or maybe it's fear of letting go and finding out who I am without the dream to chase. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Two strangers sharing truths they rarely spoke aloud. The cafe felt like a bubble outside normal time, where the rules of regular life didn't quite apply. What was your mother like? Harrison asked. Delilah smiled, the grief softening into something warmer. She was the kind of person who talked to everyone. Grocery store clerks, bus drivers, people waiting in line. She collected stories like some people collect stamps. She used to say that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. So you might as well be kind. She sounds like she would have made an amazing cafe owner. She would have loved you showing up at midnight with some dramatic story about needing coffee. Delilah laughed. She always said the best customers were the ones with interesting problems. Harrison raised his cup. Two mothers who taught us to be better than we are. Delilah clinked her cup against his. And to midnight coffee that makes confessing to strangers feel normal. A new ritual begins. They talked until past 1 in the morning, the conversation flowing easily despite their different worlds. Harrison told her about growing up under his father's shadow, learning business instead of how to make friends. Delilah shared stories about learning to roast beans, the disaster of her opening week. And the regular customers who had become like family. When Harrison finally stood to leave, he hesitated at the door. Would it be completely inappropriate if I came back tomorrow night? He asked, same time, same request, for one last cup. Delilah should have said no. She should have protected her boundaries, kept her closing time sacred, maintained professional distance. Instead, she heard herself say, I close at 11. If you're here by 11:15, I might still have the machine warm. His smile transformed his whole face, erasing years of corporate seriousness. It's a deal. And Delilah, thank you for tonight. You have no idea how much I needed this. Actually, I think I do. She held the door open for him. Good night, Harrison. Try to get some sleep. You too. She watched him disappear into the night. His expensive car parked 3 blocks away like he had been wandering before finding her cafe. Delilah locked the door and looked around at her small kingdom, seeing it slightly differently now. Maybe some promises weren't burdens after all. Maybe they were bridges to unexpected places, as she climbed the stairs to her apartment above the cafe. Delilah couldn't quite explain the lightness in her chest. One conversation shouldn't matter this much. One tired CEO shouldn't feel this significant. But as she fell asleep, she found herself wondering what tomorrow's midnight would bring. And for the first time in months, the wondering felt like hope instead of worry. When midnight becomes a promise true to his word, Harrison appeared at 11:12 the next night. Delilah saw his silhouette through the window and felt her heart do something unexpected. She had thought about him more than she cared to admit throughout the day, wondering if last night had been real or some strange dream brought on by exhaustion. "You came back," she said, opening the door before he could knock. "I promised I would." Harrison stepped inside, and this time he looked slightly less haggard. His suit jacket was off, draped over his arm, and he wore a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. "Is the offer still good?" "The machine is still warm." Delilah moved behind the counter, muscle memory guiding her hands. "Same as yesterday?" "Actually surprised me. I want to know what Delilah drinks when nobody is watching." She raised an eyebrow but nodded, pulling out ingredients for her personal favorite, a honey lavender latte that most customers found too unusual. As she worked, Harrison settled into the same chair as before, watching her with an attention that should have felt intrusive, but somehow didn't. "How was your day?" he asked, as casual as if they were old friends.
"Complicated."
"We had a rush during lunch, which was great. But then my espresso machine started making a grinding noise that definitely shouldn't be happening. If it breaks, I'm looking at a repair bill I can't really afford right now." Harrison frowned. "Have you had it serviced recently?" "Define recently." Delilah set his cup down with a slight smile. "I do what I can, but professional maintenance isn't exactly in the budget." He took a sip of the lavender latte and his eyes widened. "This is amazing. Why don't you put this on the regular menu?" "Because most people want boring and predictable. They want their usual order, made the usual way, with no surprises." She sat across from him with her own cup. "But sometimes, boring and predictable pays the bills." The proposal over the next 2 weeks, Harrison's midnight visits became routine. He would arrive around 11:15, sometimes earlier if his meetings ended sooner. They would talk about everything and nothing, sharing pieces of their lives like trading cards. Delilah learned about his difficult relationship with his late father, the pressure of running a company he inherited too young, and his secret love of old jazz records. Harrison learned about her struggles to keep the cafe afloat, her talent for creating new drink recipes that nobody ordered, and her habit of giving free coffee to the homeless man who sometimes slept in the alley behind her building. One night, Harrison arrived with an unusual expression, nervous energy radiating from him. "I have a strange question," he said before even sitting down. "Those are my favorite kind." Delilah handed him his usual cappuccino. "What if I helped out here? Like, actually worked behind the counter with you?" She nearly dropped the milk pitcher. "What? Why would you want to do that?" "Because I miss doing real things with my hands. Because board meetings are slowly killing my soul. Because when I'm here, I remember what it feels like to be a person instead of a position." He met her eyes. "And because your espresso machine needs proper maintenance, and I could have someone here tomorrow if you'd let me." Delilah shook her head, half laughing. "You're a CEO. You don't know the first thing about working in a cafe. It didn't teach me. I'm a fast learner." "Harrison, this is crazy." "Maybe, but is it any crazier than me showing up every night for 2 weeks asking for midnight coffee?" He leaned forward. "Look, I know this sounds impulsive, but I've thought about it constantly. I have good managers running the day-to-day operations at Reed Industries. I can do my essential work during the day and spend my evenings here, learning something new, being someone different. Let me try, just for a week. If I'm terrible, I'll go back to being a regular customer." Delilah wanted to say no. Every practical bone in her body screamed that this was a bad idea, but the hope in his eyes matched something stirring in her own chest. "Fine. 1 week trial. But you follow my rules. You wear whatever ridiculous apron I give you. If you break anything expensive, you're buying a replacement." Harrison's grin could have lit the entire cafe. "Deal. When do I start?" "Tomorrow night. 6 o'clock. And Harrison, don't make me regret this." Learning curves. Harrison's first night working at the cafe was a disaster wrapped in good intentions. He burned his first 3 attempts at steaming milk, somehow managed to jam the grinder despite Delilah's clear instructions, and nearly dropped an entire tray of clean mugs. How is someone so successful at business this bad at basic tasks? Delilah asked, trying not to laugh as he scraped burnt milk from the steaming pitcher. "In my defense, I usually have people who handle the actual doing while I handle the strategy." This is humbling. Good. Humility builds character. She took the picture from him and demonstrated again, her hands sure and practiced. Watch the temperature gauge. When it hits 140 degrees, you cut the steam. Too hot and you scald the milk, which is what you keep doing? He watched intently, then tried again. This time the milk came out perfectly textured, glossy, and smooth.
Did it!
His excitement was so genuine that Delilah couldn't help but smile. Don't celebrate yet. Now you have to pour it without making a mess. The pour went less well, resulting in a lopsided blob that looked nothing like the heart shape he'd been attempting. But the customer, an elderly man named Mr. Patterson, who came in every evening for decaf, accepted it with a kind smile. Best ugly coffee I've ever had, he told Harrison. Winking as the days passed, Harrison improved. He learned the rhythm of the café, the regulars' names and orders, the way to clean the espresso machine properly. More importantly, he seemed genuinely happy. The corporate tiredness that had marked his face that first night gradually faded, replaced by something lighter. Delilah found herself looking forward to 6 o'clock in a way that had nothing to do with needing help in everything, to do with wanting his company. When the world noticed the bubble burst on a busy Friday night, the cafe was packed with the after-work crowd, and Harrison was at the register taking orders while Delilah worked the espresso machine. A young woman in line kept staring at him, her phone out, clearly trying to be discreet about taking photos. When she reached the counter, she could barely contain herself. You're Harrison Reed, aren't you? The CEO? Harrison smiled politely. I am. What can I get you tonight? Oh my God, what are you doing working in a café? The woman's voice carried across the room, and suddenly every head turned. Learning to make decent coffee, Harrison replied easily. The caramel macchiato is excellent tonight. Can I interest you in one? The woman ordered, still staring, and by the time she left, Delilah's phone was already buzzing with notifications. Someone had posted a photo to social media with the caption, "Is this really Harrison Reed working as a barista?" Within an hour, the post had gone viral. By morning, news outlets were running stories with headlines like "Billionaire CEO trades boardroom for coffee shop in Red Industries." Chief found slinging lattes Delilah's cafe, which had struggled to attract customers for 3 years, suddenly had a line around the block. The pressure builds, the attention was overwhelming. Reporters showed up asking for interviews. Influencers came hoping to get photos with Harrison. Delilah's quiet neighborhood cafe transformed into a spectacle, and she felt the control of her space slipping away. This is too much, she told Harrison one night after they had finally closed, both exhausted from the chaos. People aren't coming for the coffee anymore. They're coming to gawk at you. I know. I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen. Maybe you should stop coming, the words hurt to say, but Delilah forced them out. Go back to your normal life before this gets worse. Harrison looked stricken. Is that what you want? I want my cafe back. I want quiet evenings and regular customers who come because they like the coffee, not because they want to see a CEO playing dress-up. That's not what this is. His voice hardened slightly. I'm not playing. This matters to me. You matter to me. The confession hung between them, too big and too honest. Delilah's phone buzzed. Her best friend Bethany had sent a link to a gossip site with the headline, Harrison Reed's Mystery Romance. CEO spotted getting cozy with cafe owner. The article speculated about their relationship, included photos someone had snapped through the window of them laughing together, and generally turned their genuine connection into tabloid fodder. I can't do this, Delilah whispered, showing him the article. This isn't my world. I'm not built for people picking apart every conversation, every look, every moment. Then we'll figure it out together. We'll set boundaries. I'll talk to my PR team. Your PR team? Harrison, listen to yourself. This is exactly the problem. I don't have a PR team. I have a struggling cafe and a life that was perfectly fine before Yo showed up asking for midnight coffee. The breaking point, the situation reached a crisis when Delilah saw another article, this one claiming that Harrison was engaged to Charlotte Vale, the daughter of a major business partner. The photos showed them at some charity gala from months ago, but the article made it sound current. Citing anonymous sources close to Reed Industries, Harrison's phone had been buzzing all day, with calls from his board members, concerned about the publicity affecting company image. When he finally saw the engagement article during his evening shift, his face went pale. "Delilah, that's not real. Charlotte and I were never engaged. Our families wanted it, but I refused. This is someone trying to manipulate the stock price or push me into a corner. How am I supposed to know what's real anymore?" Delilah's voice cracked. "3 weeks ago, you were a stranger asking for coffee. Now I'm reading about your supposed engagement in the news while photographers camp outside my café. This is insane. I'll fix this. I'll make a statement, clear everything up, and then what? There'll just be another story, another crisis, another reason why a CEO and a cafe owner make no sense together." Tears burned behind Delilah's eyes. Maybe everyone's right. Maybe this was just some fantasy where we pretend the real world doesn't exist. Harrison reached for her hand, but she pulled away. The hurt on his face nearly broke her resolve, but she held firm. "I need space to think," she said quietly. "Maybe you should skip tonight's coffee," he nodded slowly, understanding and heartbreak warring across his features. "If that's what you need." "But Delilah, this isn't a fantasy to me. You're the realest thing in my life." He left without another word, and the cafe felt impossibly empty, alone in the aftermath that night. Atela closed the cafe by herself for the first time in weeks. The routine that had once felt meditative now felt hollow. She kept catching herself preparing 2 cups instead of 1. Looking toward the door expecting Harrison to appear, her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Bethany called 3 times before Delilah finally answered. "Are you okay?" her friend asked immediately. "I don't know. Everything got so complicated so fast. Do you care about him?" The question hit harder than Delilah expected. "That's the problem. I do. But caring about someone doesn't mean you can build a life with them. We're from completely different worlds. Since when do you let other people decide what world you belong in?" Bethany's voice was gentle but firm. "Your mom didn't. She dreamed of a cafe when everyone told her it was impractical. You opened it when the banks said you couldn't afford it. Since when do you give up because something's hard?" After they hung up, Delilah sat alone in the dark cafe, surrounded by the dream her mother had planted and she had grown. Through the window, she could see the light from Harrison's penthouse across the city, a distant star in the urban sky. She had sent him away to protect herself from hurt. But the ache in her chest, suggested she, might have just created a different kind of pain entirely. The public declaration. Harrison spent 3 sleepless nights in his penthouse, staring at the city lights and replaying every conversation with Delilah. His board had called an emergency meeting, demanding he address the publicity situation. Charlotte Vale's father was threatening to pull a major investment. The media continued spinning stories about his mysterious cafe romance. He could fix all of it with one simple move: by distancing himself from Delilah, issuing a professional statement, returning to his carefully controlled corporate life. Instead, he called a press conference, the Reed Industries media room filled with reporters, cameras, and curious board members. Harrison stood at the podium in his usual suit, but without his usual corporate mask. He looked tired but determined. "I'm here to address recent speculation about my personal life." His voice was steady. "The rumors about an engagement to Charlotte Vale are completely false. They were never true and were planted by competitors attempting to manipulate our stock price. My legal team is already pursuing appropriate action."
Cameras flashed.
Reporters leaned forward. "However, the speculation about my relationship with Delilah Monroe is true."
Ah!
A murmur rippled through the room. "For the past month, I've been spending my evenings at her cafe, first as a customer seeking peace, and then as someone learning what it means to do meaningful work with your hands. Delilah is extraordinary, not because of any business she owns, but because she represents everything I'd forgotten about being human." One of his board members stood up, face red. "Harrison, This is completely inappropriate. What's inappropriate is living a life where you're afraid to admit caring about someone who makes you better. Harrison's eyes swept the room. I've spent 15 years building Reed Industries into what it is today. I'm proud of that work. But if the price of success is pretending I don't have a heart, then maybe we need to redefine what success means. The room erupted in questions, but Harrison held up his hand. I'm not stepping down as CEO. I'm not abandoning my responsibilities. I'm simply stating that my personal life is my own. And I won't apologize for spending time with someone who reminds me why any of this matters. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have somewhere more important to be. He walked out of the press conference, ignoring the shouted questions, and drove straight to the café. The midnight apology Delilah was wiping down tables when she heard the knock. Her heart recognized the rhythm before her mind did. 3 soft taps followed by a pause. She had told him to stay away. But apparently Harrison Reed wasn't good at following instructions. She opened the door to find him still in his suit, slightly disheveled from the press conference, holding a single white rose. Before you close the door, please just listen, he said quickly. I know I complicated your life. I know the attention has been overwhelming. I know you have every right to tell me to leave and never come back. But I had to tell you that I just stood in front of every major news outlet and my entire board of directors and told them that you're more important to me than their approval. Delilah's breath caught. You did what? I told the truth. That you're the best thing that's happened to me in years. That learning to make coffee in your cafe taught me more about life than any business deal ever has. That if caring about you costs me their respect, then their respect was never worth having. Harrison, that's career suicide. No, it's finally being alive. He stepped closer. Delilah, I understand if you need time. I understand if this is all too much. But don't push me away because you're afraid of what other people think. Your mother didn't build her dream by worrying about other people's opinions, and neither did you. Don't start now. Tears spilled down Delilah's cheeks. I was so scared. The articles, the photos, the constant judgment. I felt like I was drowning. And let me help you swim. We'll figure it out together. Set whatever boundaries you need. I'll hire security if photographers are bothering you. I'll do whatever it takes. But please don't ask me to stop caring about you because it's inconvenient for the world. Delilah looked at this man who had wandered into her cafe a month ago, exhausted and lonely, and had somehow become essential to her happiness. The fear was still there, but so was something stronger. You're terrible at making latte art, she said through her tears. Harrison's face split into a relieved smile. The worst. Truly embarrassing. And you still can't. Remember which beans go in which grinder. It's like they're all identical on purpose. And you definitely need more. Practice on the espresso machine, so come teach. Me. He held out his hand. Give me another chance. Let me prove that this is real. Delilah took his hand, feeling the rightness of it settle into her bones. One condition. No more grand romantic gestures. You've had your big press conference moment. From now on, we build something quiet and real, together. Adele Harrison pulled her close, and when he kissed her, it felt like coming home after a long journey. Building something real, the media frenzy continued for another week, but this time Delilah and Harrison faced it as a team. He hired discreet security to manage the crowds without losing the cafe's warm atmosphere. Delilah worked with a PR consultant, not to manufacture an image, but to protect her privacy without hiding who she was. Slowly, the spectacle faded. People got used to seeing Harrison behind the counter. The novelty wore off, and the cafe returned to something close to normal, though busier than before. 3 months later, on a quiet Tuesday night after closing, Harrison was practicing his latte art for the 100th time. Delilah watched from her favorite table, offering commentary. That one looks like a blob with ambitions. You're very encouraging, he replied, concentrating intensely on the pour. I'm honest. There's a difference. He finished the pour and turned the cup around with a flourish. In the foam, slightly wobbly but unmistakable, were the words, "Marry me." Delilah's eyes went wide. Harrison. He pulled a small box from his apron pocket. that ridiculous apron with a cat on it that he'd worn since his first day, and got down on one knee in the cafe where everything began. Delilah Monroe. You've taught me how to make coffee, how to clean an espresso machine, and how to be a person instead of just a position. You've given me a place where I can be myself without pretense or pressure. You've shown me that the best things in life aren't built in boardrooms, but in small moments of connection and truth. Would you consider spending the rest of your life drinking midnight coffee with me? Inside the box sat a simple silver band with a small diamond, elegant without being ostentatious, perfect for hands that worked hard. Delilah laughed through her tears, the sound filling the cafe with joy. Yes, obviously yes. But you're still terrible at latte art. I'll spend the rest of my life practicing. He slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her as the cafe around them held the moment like a warm embrace. Outside, the city continued its endless movement. But inside, time stopped for two people who had found each other in the most unexpected way. 6 months later, the wedding was small. Held in the cafe itself on a Sunday, when they were closed to the public, Bethany served as maid of honor. Mr. Patterson gave Delilah away. The ceremony lasted 20 minutes, officiated by a friend who had watched their relationship grow from those first midnight conversations. Harrison wore a simple suit. Delilah wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promising not perfection, but partnership. Not grand gestures, but everyday presence. When the minister pronounced them married, the small group of friends and family erupted in applause. Harrison kissed his bride in front of the espresso machine that had started everything. The reception featured coffee and pastries instead of champagne and cake. They danced to old jazz records in the space between tables. It was simple and perfect and completely them. Later that night, after everyone had left, Delilah and Harrison sat at their favorite table with 2 cups of coffee, still in their wedding clothes. So this is it, Delilah said, leaning her head on his shoulder. We were actually married. You having regrets about marrying someone who still makes terrible latte art? Only about your artistic skills. Everything else is perfect. Harrison wrapped his arm around her. You know what's strange? A year ago, I was standing outside this cafe feeling like I had everything but nothing that mattered. Now I have you, and suddenly everything makes sense. That's the coffee talking. I make excellent coffee. It's not the coffee. He turned to face her, serious now. It's you. It's always been you. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the snow begin to fall outside the window. The cafe that had been Delilah's mother's dream, then Delilah's burden, then her sanctuary, had become their beginning. In the months that followed, they found their rhythm. Harrison balanced his CEO responsibilities with evening shifts at the cafe. Delilah expanded her menu, finally adding those creative drinks people had always been too afraid to try. Together, they opened a second location. This one focused on job training for people who needed a second chance. The cafe where they met remained their favorite, though. Every night, after closing, they would sit together with one last cup of coffee, talking about their day, making plans, simply being together, and sometimes, when the city was quiet and the snow fell soft against the windows, they would remember that first night when a tired CEO knocked on the door asking for coffee, and a cafe owner took a chance on a stranger. That chance had changed everything.